Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. It started with a phone call and ended with a courtroom war when Seth Rollins discovered a luxury pool built on his land. Without permission, the real estate drama turned into a ruthless game of power, fraud, and revenge. They built paradise. He turned it into profit. I was halfway through a late breakfast when my phone started buzzing on the kitchen counter, vibrating against the granite like it was having a seizure. I didn't even check the caller ID. Only a handful of people ever called me before noon on a Saturday, and most of them were either family or someone who needed land measurements they should have asked for weeks ago. I swiped to answer, still chewing on toast. "Yeah? This is Seth." A familiar voice came through, tight and uneasy. "Seth, it's Will. You, might want to come down to your south lot." Will Harper had been a field inspector for the county longer than I'd owned the land. The guy talked slow and always sounded bored, so hearing tension in his voice wasn't normal. I swallowed hard. Why? Did someone dump trash on it again? Please don't tell me it's another abandoned boat. Last time, someone left a rusted fishing boat in the middle of my property like it was a free storage unit. Will didn't laugh. "I wish it were a boat. Look, it looks like construction. Real construction. I thought it was your crew. It's not, right?" I stopped chewing. Construction. My land was fenced, recorded, taxed, and patiently waiting for a future I hadn't decided on yet. And now someone was building on it. "I'm on my way," I muttered, already shoving my jacket on. It took me about 20 minutes to drive to the lot, and the closer I got, the more nervous energy surged through me. When I turned down the dirt access road, I expected maybe a few illegal fence posts or a torn-down section of wire. Instead, my brakes squealed as I stopped at something out of a promotional brochure for a suburban resort. A brand-new concrete perimeter wall ran along the roadside, high enough that I couldn't see the other side unless I stood on my toes. At the gate, there were two tall columns with glossy paint, a keypad, and a shiny metal sign that read, in large serif letters, "Residents only, Whispering Oaks Private Pool." I stared at it like I was reading a foreign language. I knew the HOA next door had money and an ego problem, but I didn't think they'd gone full invasion mode. Before I could process it, a uniformed guard stepped out of a little booth beside the gate. He had a polo shirt with a logo stitched over the chest, W Oaks Security, and an expression like I'd interrupted his meditation session. He held up a hand like he was stopping traffic. "You can't enter without a resident key." I let out a short breath, still trying to wrap words around the absurdity in front of me. "Funny thing, this is my land." He looked at me the way a lifeguard looks at a kid claiming he's Michael Phelps. "If you're a resident, you need your key to enter. If you're part of maintenance, you need to go to the service gate on the south side. We don't allow staff through resident access." I blinked at him. "Staff? Did I look like I was holding a pool skimmer?" He tapped the sign with his knuckles. "No tag, no entry. Rules are rules." My first instinct was to laugh in his face, but my second instinct was more professional. Document everything. I took out my phone and started filming, focusing on the gates, the sign, the wall, and the uniformed doorman who was somehow standing on my property and keeping me out. He sensed the shift in tone and stiffened. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to stop filming." I ignored him, zooming in on the keypad, while his voice climbed slightly higher. "Sir, that is company property." I looked him dead in the eye. "And this is my company property." He hesitated, but he didn't reach for me or try to block my movement. Smart. I dialed the police, still filming, and explained what I was looking at. The dispatcher sounded as confused as I felt, but she promised to send a patrol car. I leaned against my truck and kept the camera rolling as workers walked in and out of the fenced area with toolboxes, tiled flooring, electrical cables, and even a stack of brand new lounge chairs still wrapped in plastic. Meanwhile, the guards stood by, unsure whether to keep pretending I was an intruder or start questioning reality. When the police arrived, they listened to both of us and then shrugged with that special brand of Texas law enforcement diplomacy. "This looks like a civil dispute until ownership is verified. Nobody's hurt, nobody's breaking in, so we can't force anyone out or open the gate without a court order. If you want to file a report, you can do so at the station." The guard smirked, like the law had just chosen him in a custody battle. I filed the report anyway and made sure it included the phrases unauthorized construction and trespassing on private property. The officers logged the case and left, while workers continued installing tile around a pool I didn't ask for. Before leaving, I sent a drone up to capture aerial footage. That little buzzing camera felt like the only sane thing on the property. From above, I could see it clearly. The entire pool complex, sauna structure, patio layout, fencing, even underground piping trenches. They hadn't just started this. They were almost done. Someone had spent thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, building a luxury amenity on my dirt like it was a free real estate upgrade. Standing in the red dust of my own land, watching strangers polish tiles around a pool I supposedly didn't own, something clicked in my head. Not anger, just a cold certainty. Whoever did this thought I wouldn't fight back. They thought I was asleep. I locked the footage, turned off the drone, and headed to my truck in silence, knowing exactly what I'd do next. By the time I got home, I'd already transferred every video, aerial shot, and photo into 3 separate drives. I wasn't about to lose evidence because my laptop decided to die of old age. I kept replaying the image of that wall in my mind, tall and polished, like it had every right to be there. I could still hear the guard telling me where maintenance staff should enter. The whole thing felt surreal, like I'd walked into a poorly written commercial where I was supposed to smile and thank someone for giving me what I never wanted. Late that afternoon, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I picked up, expecting maybe the police or the inspector following up. Instead, a woman's voice, cheerful enough to sell used cars without guilt, flowed through the speaker. "Mr. Rollins, I'm so glad we connected. This is Karen Griswold, president of Whispering Oaks Homeowners Association. I heard there was a little misunderstanding today regarding your access to the pool." I didn't respond immediately. Something in her tone suggested I wasn't supposed to talk. Just listen and be grateful. Before I could ask who gave her my number, she continued, "I'll be at your property in 20 minutes to clear this all up. Don't worry, sweetie. Everything will make sense once I explain it properly." Sweetie. That was an insult dressed in a floral cardigan. I hung up before she could get cute again. I got back into my truck and headed out. If she was going to show up at my lot, she wasn't meeting an empty one. When I arrived, the construction crews were gone, replaced by a freshly polished security booth and a wide walkway leading into the complex. They'd added potted palms near the gate like they were hosting a resort opening. A golf cart pulled up just as I did, and out stepped a woman in her 60s wearing coral-colored lipstick, pearl earrings, and an expression like she was about to lower taxes by pure willpower. She walked toward me with her arms open as though greeting a returning family member. "Seth," she exclaimed, as if we were childhood friends. "I am so glad you're here. Honestly, I thought the staff would have recognized you." I looked around, gesturing at the gate, the booth, everything that wasn't supposed to exist. "Recognized me as what? The guy who owns the dirt you built all of this on?" She nodded sympathetically, like she was comforting someone who misunderstood basic algebra. "Oh no. As the beneficiary, you weren't using the space, so we assumed temporary custody. Our community voted to enhance the area with amenities that would benefit everyone in the vicinity, including you." Beneficiary. Temporary custody. She tossed those phrases out like she was quoting scripture. My jaw tightened, but I refused to lose my cool. Whispering Oaks isn't the vicinity. It's next door, and you built this on my property. She waved one hand as if brushing away a mosquito. "We didn't find active usage. No plans on file, no ongoing development, nothing indicating future construction goals. The land was just sitting there, fenced and sad, and we thought, why not give it life? A community oasis." A community oasis. I considered pointing out that graveyards also bring communities together, but I held it in. Instead, I said, "You assumed wrong, and you're trespassing. All of this is trespassing." She smiled with a calculated serenity, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small plastic fob, bright green with a barcode and embossed logo. She held it out to me like she was handing over a prize I'd won in a raffle. "Here's your key. For you, access is absolutely free. We even reserved a lounger with your name on it. Seth R. Rollins, right? Isn't that thoughtful?" I took the fob without touching her hand, just to keep it as evidence. "My name is Seth Rollins," I corrected. No middle initial. She blinked once, then smiled wider as if she hadn't heard me at all. "Wonderful. So glad we're cooperating. What you need to do now is allow the HOA maintenance schedule to continue uninterrupted. Any legal dispute would only delay public enjoyment and might cause damage to the structure, and none of us want to hurt the community, right?" I stared at her for a moment. She wasn't crazy, not in the medical sense. She was strategic. If I erupted, she'd label me the unstable land hoarder ruining public good. If I hesitated, she'd treat silence as consent, so I kept my tone calm. I'll be submitting a written notice through the county and through my attorney. You'll get documentation by the end of the week. Something flickered behind her eyes when I said, attorney. Barely noticeable, but there. She recovered fast, plastering on another grandmother of the year smile. Of course, paperwork always makes people feel secure. Looking forward to a productive relationship, Seth. She climbed back into the golf cart and waved like we were old pals. I didn't wave back. Instead, I spent the rest of the evening contacting the county office, requesting certified copies of my deed, historic parcel maps, and tax records proving my ownership and the exact boundary lines. I also pulled my archived aerial surveys, including time-stamped photographs from almost every year since 2014. I attached them all to a formal notice of unauthorized use and land encroachment addressed to Whispering Oaks HOA, pending further legal action. Karen thought she'd given me a gift. What she didn't realize was that she also handed me the knife to cut her organization open, layer by layer, until every bad decision they'd made on my land was exposed under daylight. For the next several days, I treated documentation the way some people treat religion. I uploaded everything to cloud storage, made printouts, notarized copies, and even set up a fireproof lockbox just for the fun of watching paranoia turn into preparedness. I wasn't going to be the guy who lost a case because a thunderstorm fried his laptop. On the third morning after meeting Karen, I came home from work to find a thick envelope sitting neatly on my porch, tucked under a glossy Whispering Oaks welcome brochure as if someone decided I needed both legal paperwork and a coupon for pickleball lessons. The envelope was labeled Agreement of Temporary Land Use and Community Benefit Lease. The phrasing alone sounded like it had been written by someone who thought they were smarter than everyone else in the room. I opened it, slid the papers out, and nearly laughed loud enough for my neighbor to hear me through the walls. Inside was a contract, backdated by over a year, claiming that I had agreed to grant the HOA access to my land for the purpose of enriching the community. The signature at the bottom was apparently mine, except it wasn't. It read, Seth R. Wallens, in a shaky cursive signature that looked like someone had forged it using their non-dominant hand while riding a bus over potholes. Not only did they misspell my last name, they added a middle initial that I don't have. They even used a different pen for the date, and whoever filled it out didn't bother checking the formatting. The contract also carried a faint, very faint, stamp at the bottom. No registration number, no seal embossing, no notary. A legal document with about as much legitimacy as a lemonade stand license scribbled on a napkin. They'd gone through all that effort to steal my land, but couldn't Google my name long enough to spell it right. I documented every page, every typo, every mismatched font. Then I called the police, not the emergency line, but the direct non-emergency dispatch. I explained that a fraudulent legal document had been delivered to me by a homeowners association attempting to seize control of my land. The dispatcher asked me to hold, which I expected, but didn't expect her to come back and say, an officer will meet you at your property within the hour. Apparently, forged legal agreements get attention faster than trespass complaints do. Officer Ramirez showed up, a serious athletic guy who looked like he'd rather wrestle criminals than listen to neighbor drama. I showed him the forged contract, the property footage, and the aerial shots. The moment he saw the fake signature and backdate, his eyebrows shot up. Sir, this is fraudulent filing. If anyone tried to submit this formally, it's a criminal offense. I appreciated that he didn't sugarcoat it. So, I asked, is this something the HOA president gets a warning for? Or are we beyond gentle chats and bake sales now? Ramirez cracked a smirk. We're well past bake sales. He took the documents, photographed everything again with chain of custody timestamps, and asked me to sign a statement confirming that I never authorized construction, never signed the lease, and never granted access to the land. I signed. He sealed the papers in an evidence bag like they were freshly discovered murder weapons. Ramirez said I'd be contacted by a detective and possibly by the county prosecutor. I couldn't help but imagine Karen's coral lipstick trembling when she learned she'd graduated from HOA queen to a participant in a criminal case. But I wasn't done. I still needed immediate leverage. I contacted my lawyer, a land use specialist named Trina, and forwarded her everything. She didn't waste time with niceties. Her message back read, We're filing a cease and desist for unauthorized construction and submitting a fraud claim. Do not, under any circumstances, confront HOA members directly again. Let's make them sweat legally. I liked her already. That afternoon, the court clerk accepted the paperwork, and by evening, a temporary injunction landed at the HOA office. Usage of the pool and facilities on my land was officially suspended pending investigation. If they so much as lifted a pool float, they'd be violating court order. That's when the fun began. The next morning, residents of Whispering Oaks showed up at the gate with towels, sun hats, coolers, and confused expressions. Security guards had to explain that the pool was closed due to an administrative error. Someone tried to argue with them. Someone threatened to sue. Someone pounded on the gate like they were trying to escape a burning building rather than get to a pool they didn't need. And then Karen showed up, not with a smile this time, but with a strained expression, clutching a clipboard like she was preparing for war. She looked furious, not because she was caught, I realized, but because someone dared to hinder her grand plan. Dogs growl when cornered. Karen went quiet, scanning the scene, looking for someone to blame, someone to paint as the villain. She finally spotted me across the road and stared like she expected me to feel ashamed. I lifted my phone and took a single photo of her standing behind a locked gate on land she didn't own. Her expression said more than any statement could. She turned away sharply, and I knew then that she wasn't done fighting, but neither was I. And unlike her, I had the law, the land, and the receipts. It didn't take long for Whispering Oaks to show their true colors once their community paradise got shut down. The morning after the injunction, I woke up to 8 missed calls from an unknown local number and 1 voicemail full of yelling. I didn't listen to all of it, just enough to hear the words selfish land hoarder and you're hurting families. Families apparently desperately needed a sauna to survive the Texas heat. On my way out to work, I noticed something else, a long, ugly scratch carved across the driver's side of my truck. Not a random scrape. Someone had dragged something sharp from headlight to tailgate, like they wanted me to feel every inch of insult. A piece of duct tape was stuck under the handle. On it, someone had scribbled with thick marker, "Leave while you can." No signature. HOA thugs don't sign their art. I took pictures from every angle, filed another police report, emailed it to my lawyer, and didn't bother getting upset. Anger was surfacing, sure, but it was like a controlled burn, calculated, not explosive. I wasn't about to run around screaming about vandalism like a man with no strategy. I'd let them stack their crimes like bricks, and then I'd let the law knock the structure down. By evening, more entertainment arrived. Someone had shoved stacks of HOA pamphlets into my mailbox, each one featuring smiling children splashing in a pool that, ironically, they were now banned from. The brochure hinted at a local dispute with an uncooperative neighbor. It suggested that members of the community should stay alert and report suspicious behaviors from unknown individuals. Unknown individuals on my own property. The punchline came a day later when my boss called me into his office. He leaned against his desk with a careful expression like he was about to ask if I'd been stealing staplers. "Got an interesting phone call this morning," he said. "Someone claiming to be from Whispering Oaks told our office you've been threatening the community over there, making trouble, intimidating people, acting unstable." I closed my eyes for a second, not from shock, but because I could already smell Karen's perfume behind the complaint. My boss continued, arms crossed. "Thing is, Seth, I told them I've never met anyone less intimidating than you. You're about as dangerous as a tape measure." He paused, then grinned. "Just figured you should know someone out there hates you enough to try to ruin your job." We shared a laugh, but underneath the humor, I knew exactly what that was. Escalation. Whispering Oaks was done playing nice. They couldn't get my land legally, so they were shifting tactics, make me look like a menace. If I reacted emotionally or aggressively even once, they'd use it as proof of their narrative. I'd become the villain standing in the way of public benefit. They weren't winning, so they were rewriting the story. I tripled my security instead. I installed 4 new cameras on the perimeter of my home and set notifications to alert me if anyone stepped foot within a certain radius. It took less than 48 hours for those cameras to pay off. Late one night, a BMW with tinted windows crept past my yard, paused long enough for someone inside to point a camera toward my house, then slowly rolled away. I saved the footage, noted the time, even zoomed in to capture part of a license plate through the glare. But the real jackpot came 2 mornings later when I popped open my mailbox and saw a small black object on the ground near the front tire of my truck. At first, I thought it was a dropped key fob or a weird piece of trash. Then I picked it up. Small, magnetic, with a battery slot and a serial number stamped on the side. A GPS tracker. I checked my truck and found a smear of fresh dust near the undercarriage. Someone had stuck that device to my vehicle. Someone wanted to know where I went, what I did, maybe even how to corner me somewhere without cameras and witnesses. I didn't panic. I didn't shout. I took a picture, slipped the tracker into an evidence bag left over from my surveying kit, and drove straight to the same police station Officer Ramirez worked from. He wasn't there, but another officer took the report, and I emphasized the connection. Ongoing harassment linked to a fraudulent HOA contract in unauthorized property development. After hearing the summary, the officer's tone shifted markedly. A GPS tracker falls under stalking and potentially conspiracy, depending on who placed it. He wrote up a detailed report. We'll send this to the county prosecutor. They'll want to look into it alongside the fraud case. Alongside. That word felt like progress. HOA didn't just trespass anymore. They escalated into criminal territory. They crossed into my life, my work, my home, and now my movements. Every petty tactic they used was going to backfire because the more desperate they became, the easier they were to catch. Driving home with a receipt of evidence in my pocket, I passed the wall around the pool one more time. It was quiet now, gates shut, sunbeds collecting dust like a sad, overpriced zoo exhibit. For the first time, there were no workers, no guards, just an empty resort sinking into silence. Whispering Oaks wanted to treat my land as a gift to the community. Now it looked like a shrine to their own stupidity. And they still hadn't realized how deep they were in. They'd only made one mistake. They'd made me angry. And worse, they'd made me methodical. The temporary injunction didn't just shut the gates. It froze the whole fantasy world. Whispering Oaks had tried to build on my dirt. 2 days after the tracker incident, I drove out to the site with an independent evaluator hired through my attorney. His name was Grant Hayes, a civil and structural inspector with the sense of humor of a rusted pipe. He didn't smile or chat. He simply scanned the property with a clipboard and a laser measurer like he was preparing to condemn a building. Perfect man for the job. We were joined by a county water engineer, Ms. Porter, who looked like she'd rather be interrogating someone than evaluating a swimming pool. She took one look at the filtration system hooked into pipes buried beneath the fence line and muttered, "Oh, they're going to hate this." I asked her what she meant. She crouched down and tapped the PVC line running underground. City supply. No permit. No meter. They're stealing water. She said it just loud enough to let it sink in. I knelt beside her, staring at the glossy tile edge of the pool like it was a crime scene, which it was. So they built a luxury pool and hooked it up like a backyard garden hose? She shrugged. A very illegal hose. Grant climbed onto a ladder to inspect electrical conduits running into the sauna building. No ground fault protection, he declared, deadpan. They're one power surge away from turning this place into a community electrocution center. He scribbled on his clipboard, unbothered, while I pictured Karen bragging about safety standards as residents got fried like catfish. While they continued gathering measurements, I set my drone up again. Aerial shots showed the whole property clearly defined. The wall, the complex, even the landscaping. I zoomed in on the stamped logo on the lounge chairs. Ordered in bulk, high-end brand, likely paid using HOA reserve funds. A playground-sized waste of money. But if they spent community funds on private land without approval, that wasn't just a mistake. That was misappropriation. The HOA board could be held personally liable. Maybe that was why they were panicking enough to track my car. Their mistake wasn't just illegal, it was expensive. The inspector duo documented for almost 2 hours, collecting evidence, angles, serial numbers, dates, and GPS coordinates. They photographed every connecting point that led underground, every code violation, every hazard overlooked to rush construction. When they finished, they shook my hand with the grim satisfaction of people who'd found enough problems to fill a courtroom buffet. Before we left, a small audience gathered behind the gate, residents angry and curious. A man in a sun visor shouted through the bars, "You're ruining our neighborhood. You know that?" I stared at him, trying to decide if he believed it or just didn't want to drive to the next town for a pool. "Your neighborhood ruined itself," I replied. I'm just documenting the wreckage." He yelled something about ungrateful outsiders, which was ironic considering I lived there first. By that evening, news traveled fast. I don't know if it started with a nervous board member or a resident with buyer's remorse, but my inbox blew up with links to community forum posts and local chatter. Someone leaked a rumor. The pool was built illegally, using residents' money, and the owner of the land is suing. HOA residents, already irritated about the closure, now realized they weren't getting their money's worth. And nothing turns people against their rulers faster than wasted money. Whispering Oaks tried to fight back. Karen summoned a few local journalists and held what she clearly thought was a press appearance. Standing in front of the gates like a politician defending freedom, she claimed the pool closure was the result of a personal grudge by a hostile landowner who refuses to help his community. She called it an unfortunate misunderstanding and insisted everything would be resolved as soon as communication barriers were overcome. But that's when the journalist asked a question she clearly didn't expect. "Do you have written authorization showing that the land belongs to the HOA, not Mr. Rollins?" Karen stammered, smiled too wide, tried to redirect. The journalist pressed again. Residents behind the gate muttered. Cameras zoomed. Silence strangled her little speech. And it was the most beautiful silence I'd heard all week. When the clip hit local media, the HOA lost the narrative. Their heroic community project turned into something sleazier, a private takeover paid for by their own pockets. And just like that, the crowd that once treated me like a villain started turning on their queen. Not because they cared about my land. People rarely care about justice until it digs into their wallets. That night, I sent a new round of reports to my lawyer, along with the leaked video. She emailed back one sentence that told me exactly where this was headed. "We're not just seeking damages now, we're seeking accountability." The pool wasn't just illegal anymore, it was radioactive, and everyone who touched it was starting to feel the burn. The hearing was scheduled faster than I expected. Maybe the county was tired of Whispering Oaks acting like a monarch in a democracy, or maybe the prosecutor had taken one look at the forged lease and decided it belonged in the same folder as dumb criminal memes. Either way, a judge wanted explanations, and he wanted them soon. Trina told me to show up in clean clothes, bring nothing but my documents, and let the evidence do the heavy lifting. "Don't talk unless spoken to," she said. "This isn't a debate stage. We have facts. They have excuses." The courthouse felt colder than usual when I stepped inside. Whispering Oaks showed up in full force. 3 board members in matching navy blazers, Karen in a white suit with a gold brooch shaped like an eagle, as if she were here to defend freedom instead of fraud. She carried 3 binders under one arm like props, and her expression had that glossy confidence you see on people who believe they can talk their way out of anything. She didn't look at me, which probably meant her lawyer told her not to. Good advice. She wasn't someone who looked better when she opened her mouth. We were called in, and the judge, a gray-haired man with half-moon glasses, began by reviewing the injunction. He skimmed the file, flipped a page, paused, and finally said, "Before we go further, I want to confirm something for the record. The disputed land belongs solely to Mr. Seth Rollins, documented through tax records, transfer of deed, and parcel history dating back more than a decade, correct?" He looked at the HOA's attorney. The poor guy leaned into the mic with a voice like a dying leaf blower. "Yes, Your Honor, we acknowledge the land is owned by Mr. Rollins. However," the judge cut him off before the "however" could finish its first vowel. "Then the pool and associated structures were built on land Whispering Oaks does not own?" Silence. The kind of silence that hovers like a ghost waiting to drag someone to the afterlife. Their attorney swallowed hard. "That appears to be the case, Your Honor, but we argue there was implied consent based on lack of opposition and—" The judge raised one eyebrow, lethal as a guillotine. "Implied consent? For construction of a multi-$1,000 facility on land that is privately owned, without a written agreement, without permit filings, without notarization? How exactly do you interpret consent? Psychic transmission?" Someone behind me choked, trying not to laugh. Karen stiffened in her seat like someone had dumped ice water down her spine. Trina stood next, laying out our side with the precision of a surgeon. She presented aerial photos with timestamps from over 8 years, proving there had never been shared access, never collaboration, never permission. She presented the forged lease, pointing out the wrong name, inconsistent dates, and non-existent notary data. Then she brought up the damage assessments, theft of city water, code violations, safety risks, and the illegal structure. She finished with the police report on the GPS tracker. The judge looked up sharply at that one. A tracker on his vehicle. Recovered from under the car chassis, Trina replied. Evidence bag filed with the county. Serial number links to a contractor hired by Whispering Oaks HOA. Karen finally cracked. She slammed a hand on the table, her voice exploding like a kettle left too long on the stove. You can't prove we ordered that. Anyone could have. The judge banged his gavel. Sit down, ma'am. Now. She sat so fast her chair squeaked. The board members on either side of her suddenly looked like they regretted volunteering for anything in their lives, including kindergarten show and tell. The judge took a long moment, adjusted his glasses, and then delivered the ruling with the calm tone of someone dropping an anvil from a rooftop. He affirmed full ownership of the land to me. He ruled the pool, sauna, and adjacent amenities as unauthorized structures built through illegal appropriation and fraudulent misrepresentation. He granted us an award of monetary damages for unlawful use of land, compensation for emotional and professional interference, and costs related to legal, survey, and evaluation fees. The totals, when read aloud, hit like a sledgehammer. Hundreds of thousands owed by Whispering Oaks. Then came the part that made everyone freeze. Instead of ordering demolition outright, the judge gave them one choice: either dismantle the entire complex at their own expense or enter into a tenancy agreement with me, leasing the land for a period no less than 10 years, at a rate set by market value and legal penalty combined. He looked directly at their attorney when he added, "The lease payment will substantially exceed initial construction costs. Consider it a financial lesson in asking permission." Every person in the room turned to look at Karen. Her face. I've seen dogs at vet clinics handle bad news more gracefully. She whispered something through clenched teeth, probably praying or planning a murder. The gavel struck. Case closed. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, but all I heard was the sound of Karen's pride snapping like old wire. They weren't just wrong. They owed me. They owed the city. And their lives were about to get very, very expensive. Whispering Oaks didn't collapse overnight. It buckled slowly, like a rotted deck, giving way one splinter at a time. For the first week after the ruling, they projected an aura of artificial calm. Emails sent to residents were full of reassuring phrases, minor adjustments, temporary financial obligations, strategic partnership with neighboring landowner. Karen tried to spin the situation into some kind of visionary collaboration, as if a judge had personally blessed her with a business agreement instead of shoving one down her throat. The illusion cracked fast. Maintenance fees spiked. Residents were charged special usage contributions. A line item for a community enhancement recovery fund suddenly appeared, vague enough to cover anything. People who'd once cheered the pool now stared at their HOA bills like they were reading ransom notes. On local forums, anonymous posts began to surface. Someone uploaded documents showing money had been diverted from storm drainage projects and sidewalk repairs to help build the pool. Another resident shared receipts from a landscaping company, paid triple the industry rate, suspiciously timed around construction. Then someone leaked an invoice labeled Expedited Permit Advisory. The county confirmed they'd never seen a permit request from Whispering Oaks. Everything began to look less like a pool and more like a Ponzi scheme with lounge chairs. Meanwhile, I had paperwork of my own. The judge's ruling required Whispering Oaks to either demolish the entire complex or sign a lease drafted by my lawyer. If they refused, they'd face daily fines so large they would drown before demolition even began. Their board held emergency meetings, but residents packed the room and shredded them with questions. Why did they approve spending reserve funds? Who authorized construction? Who forged documents? Why didn't they verify land ownership? And why, in the name of chlorine and common sense, did they think they'd get away with it? The word embezzlement started appearing in hushed conversations. Within 2 more weeks, 3 board members resigned, citing health reasons and a need to focus on other priorities. One of them left town entirely, which only made things look worse. An internal audit committee was hastily formed by panicked residents. And in the middle of all this chaos, the county prosecutors quietly announced a deeper investigation into fraudulent spending and permit falsification. Whispering Oaks signed the lease. Trina drafted it, and the board signed with the enthusiasm of prisoners being handed ankle monitors. 10 years, $35,000 per year, adjusted annually for inflation and penalties. I would act as landlord, with full authority to restrict access, enforce safety compliance, and approve all vendors. Rent was due in quarterly installments, plus back pay for illegal use of my land. The HOA treasurer shook so hard while signing that his pen scratched through the signature line. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt practical. They wanted to take something from me. Now they'd pay to borrow it. If they'd built a golden statue of Karen, I would have charged a worship fee. With the ink barely dry, I formed a small LLC and transferred the land into its portfolio. Not to escape responsibility, quite the opposite. If HOA was forced to pay a landlord, it was going to be a business landlord capable of billing fees, enforcing penalties, and protecting assets with corporate clause. The land might still legally belong to me as a person, but the manager of that land? A ruthless little company with a tax ID and no sense of humor. When the LLC papers finalized, I paid an electrician licensed, unlike the last batch, to rewire the sauna building and install cameras at the gates. The guards would now work for the LLC, not the HOA. They'd enforce my rules, not Karen's. The pool that once excluded me would now exclude anyone who thought they still ran the place. The first day the gates reopened under my control, I installed a new sign at the entrance. Simple, clean metal, bold letters, private spring. Access by paid membership only. Owned and operated by Rollins Property Management, LLC. Residents lined up grumbling as they scanned their cards and saw a paywall screen pop up on the app. Membership fees, safety waivers, scheduled access. There was no outrage shouting at me now. Just the sound of reluctant credit card payments clicking through the system. Karen didn't show her face that day. Rumor was she'd been asked to step down from her position as president. Someone else was handing out key cards with the enthusiasm of a supermarket cashier at closing time. Nobody smiled, nobody thanked her, nobody defended her. The pool had water, the people had regret, and I had leverage. Whispering Oaks wasn't sinking, it was paying rent for the privilege of drowning slowly. I didn't expect the pool to become a symbol. I expected profits, headaches, maybe the occasional entitled tantrum from someone who didn't like paying for what they used to treat as free. What I got instead was an accidental landmark in petty justice. Within a month of reopening under my management, whispers spread through real estate circles, homeowner forums, and even a few legal blogs that loved a good HOA meltdown. People started referring to the pool as the Rollins Resort, which I didn't authorize, but wasn't about to correct. If a nickname brings in membership fees, you let it live. Residents from outside Whispering Oaks began asking for access, some willing to pay more than the HOA members themselves. One woman joked that she'd rather pay me than donate another cent to that sinking Titanic of incompetence. So I expanded. Reservation tiers, private event rentals, swim lessons, weekend yoga by the water. If they wanted a community asset, I'd give them one, but on a spreadsheet, not a brochure. Then the bomb dropped. The county prosecutor filed charges against Karen Griswold and 2 remaining board members for fraud, misappropriation of community funds, falsification of documents, and conspiracy to obtain property by deception. That last one had a familiar ring to it. Word spread like sunscreen in July heat, and soon residents weren't just irritated, they were furious. At the hearing, Karen didn't stride in like a queen this time. She shuffled in, eyes hollow, wearing the same white suit she'd worn when she tried to sweet-talk me with a key fob. Maybe she didn't own anything else, or maybe she thought the outfit still represented her authority. It didn't. The courtroom was packed, not with supporters, but with residents looking at her the way parents look at a kid who broke something expensive and lied about it. The prosecutor laid out everything: fake documents, redirected funds, false permit claims, unauthorized contracting, illegal surveillance. Karen tried once to object, and the judge shut her down with a tone so icy the whole room tightened their shoulders. When the charges were read aloud, a few HOA members sighed, loudly, angrily. No sympathy, no solidarity. She wasn't their leader anymore. She was the bill they had to pay for believing in a bad idea. I didn't testify. Trina handled everything on my behalf. All I did was sit there, listening, watching the person who lectured me about community benefit squirm in the shadow of a community she nearly bankrupted. The judge ordered pretrial detention due to risk of evidence tampering and obstruction. That meant jail, not later, now. A bailiff clasped her wrists. She looked back, not at me, but at the residents, as if expecting someone, anyone, to stand up for her. No one did. As she was led out, she passed me. For a split second, she met my eyes, and I couldn't tell if she wanted to scream or sob. But the only thing that crossed her face was the realization that she hadn't lost to me. She'd lost to her own arrogance. I nodded once, not out of spite, just acknowledgement. She glared weakly, as if she still expected gratitude for the pool she gave me. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but I didn't take questions. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't an activist. I just owned land, defended it, and monetized stupidity when it wandered into my fence line. Weeks passed. Whispering Oaks limped on with a new board that spoke softly and spent money like they were handling nitroglycerin. Residents were strangely polite whenever I passed by. I didn't gloat. I didn't lecture. I just ran a business, collected quarterly lease payments, and added more amenities as demand grew. Eventually, I built an entrance pavilion with curved steel, stone landscaping, and a new name carved into the front in clean lettering. Private Spring, built without permission, owned permanently. Below it, a smaller plaque. Whispering Oaks, residents, welcome, membership required, key fob non-refundable. People laughed when they saw it. Some rolled their eyes. Others simply scanned their phones, paid their fees, and walked in. That was the real ending. No dramatic speech, no moral lesson shouted from rooftops, just a gate, a business, and a quiet reminder that land rights are not suggestions. The pool sparkled, the sun loungers filled, kids splashed, life went on, and every month like clockwork, Whispering Oaks wired another piece of their pride straight into my bank account. They built a luxury amenity without asking me. I turned it into my retirement plan. Some gifts really do keep on giving.